SpongeBob SquarePants almost needs no introduction. You already know it's about the titular character's adventures with Patrick Star, Squidward, and others in the city of Bikini Bottom. It's a program that's been translated into 24 different languages and broadcasted in 170 different countries. And it's still ongoing, with new episodes coming out almost 25 years later. But even if you've never seen a full episode of SpongeBob, you've seen the memes. Off the top of my head, I could think of like 5 different SpongeBob meme templates, and those are just the popular ones. There are multiple reasons why SpongeBob memes are so prevalent. Premiering in 1999, SpongeBob is remembered as a 90s cartoon alongside other greats and taps into 90s kid nostalgia, the aforementioned widespread distribution of the series, and the way these memes elicit an emotional response regardless of in-show context, especially if it touches on adult themes and topics. And there's one episode that I absolutely love because it has spawned a few memes thanks to its relatable adult themes. An episode that touches on the topics of poor pay and working conditions, conflict with the boss, and organized labor culture that many of us today can relate to. An episode containing cultural references that, as a child, you probably didn't catch or understand. I'm talking about Squid on Strike. Squid on Strike starts with a picket sign title card and an old-timey guitar and harmonica theme over it. This is a reference to IWW songwriter Joe Hill, singers Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, and folk music in general, which has a strong connection with the labor movement. Friend of the channel, MitNerd, has contributed to this tradition with much of his own work, especially as Riot Bard on Lefty charity streams. Here's a list of folk songs to check out after this video. The episode proper begins with miserly Mr. Krabs busting open the books and finding that the Krusty Krab is down an exorbitant $3 from last month. Flabbergasted, Mr. Krabs exclaims that he needs to start running a tighter ship around the restaurant. This includes criticizing his employees for giving customers change and all time spent not completing tasks that bring in profit. If you've ever worked any low to mid-income job, you've heard the words, "I'm not paying you to do whatever task is related to your comfort or survival." Bosses call this time theft. The idea that employees who are on the clock but not completing work are stealing from the company because they are still getting paid. And Mr. Krabs goes all in on this concept. When he finally gives SpongeBob and Squidward their meager restitution, Squidward instead finds Mr. Krabs' drawls. A bill for standing, talking, and even existing, which is his job as a cashier, by the way. You would say, please let cashiers sit. So this is an extreme form of pay docking, where employers deduct wages as punishment. Historically, bosses deducted pay for being late, poorly manufactured goods, or really whenever they wanted, until the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This law gave American workers the right to a minimum wage, time and a half, and to not have their wages deducted below minimum wage or for unfavorably produced goods. However, employers can still dock pay for some employees for register shortages, damaged or lost property, and safety violations. But an even more widespread problem than this is wage theft, a criminal act where employers fail to pay workers according to the law. Wage theft includes paying less than minimum wage, not paying overtime, not allowing workers to take meal and rest breaks, requiring off-the-clock work, or taking workers' tips. However, the biggest crime that employers commit is time theft. The real time theft, where corporations rob us of our whole lives in exchange for meager restitution just so someone can accrue more wealth than they'll ever be able to spend. Only in retirement do workers get to live their lives, and many never make it that far. Anyway, Mr. Krabs then institutes a new workplace policy that wages will be docked for goofing off. SpongeBob, who refused his paycheck by the way, attempts to retroactively pay Mr. Krabs for his nonsense, but is stopped by Squidward. Squidward proudly proclaims that he and SpongeBob should unite as workers and demand the respect they deserve from the boss. He suggests that they go on strike. Squidward convinces SpongeBob by getting him to vocally agree that he likes his job, wants to be able to continue working there, and expects to be treated with respect by Mr. Krabs. SpongeBob agrees to go on strike, even though he doesn't know what a strike is. He starts jubilantly chanting, "We're going on strike," throughout the restaurant until he bumps into Mr. Krabs, where he makes a huge mistake confirming the entire strike plan to him. So in response to Mr. Krabs' oppressive new policy, Squidward uses a labor organizer's most important tool, a one-on-one meeting, or a meeting between an organizer and a coworker or community member. The purpose of these meetings is to form a relationship with a person by having them explain their specific needs, ideas, and solutions in a secure setting while elucidating why collective action is the strategy needed to achieve any goal. This is accomplished through the framework of AEIONU, or agitate, educate, inoculate, organize, and union or push, depending on who you ask. There's a lot more to this process than I can discuss here, but if you want to learn more, you can watch this video here, or better yet, take organizer training from the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, or EWOC, or Emergency Workers Organizing Committee. And yes, by this point, SpongeBob and Squidward are a union. A union is simply two or more coworkers trying to improve their workplace. Though Squidward's one-on-one is successful, he makes some critical mistakes here. First, a one-on-one meeting should never be done in the workplace because it risks the boss hearing the discussion. Once the boss finds out, union busting starts immediately. And second, Squidward does not properly educate SpongeBob on what strike action is or explain why one shouldn't loudly talk about strike action in the workplace, especially with the boss. And before we move on, notice what was the last and most angering point for Mr. Krabs about the strike.
And you're gonna demand me respect?
Demanding respect. That is truly the biggest problem employers have with workers attempting to unionize, even more so than having to increase wages or benefits. They absolutely despise how unions generally challenge their authority by forcing the employer to treat workers with even a modicum of the respect they demand for themselves. Anyway, Squidward's failure to properly educate SpongeBob results in both of them getting fired. But Squidward reassures SpongeBob by suggesting they strike anyway, stating that he'll get his job back and more. Squidward declares that they are workers united, and Mr. Krabs will realize that he needs them more than they need him. Which is a real labor slogan and the truth. Bosses need workers more than workers need bosses. Moreover, is this legal? No, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 gives private sector workers the right to strike and... wait, does the National Labor Relations Board even have jurisdiction here? Where is Bikini Bottom located? The bottom of Bikini Atoll. Well, that explains a lot. And this makes them the only permanent inhabitants of this region thanks to colonialism. So technically, they don't have the legal right to strike. And even if they did, it doesn't mean they couldn't be permanently replaced thanks to National Labor Relations Board v. McKay Radio and Telegraph Company, in the case of an economic strike, which this is. In the case of an unfair labor practice strike, the employer may not legally fire or replace strikers. Additionally, there are legally protected and unprotected strikes. One example of the latter is a sit-down strike, where workers occupy the workplace. Engaging in an unprotected strike presents unions with the risk of legal consequences, but workers have successfully struck regardless of legality. Anyway, SpongeBob and Squidward have officially gone on strike. Squidward states the first step is to remove their uniforms, as uniforms are a symbol of our oppression. True. Uniforms are intentionally designed to make us stand out as employees, are often uncomfortable, and are almost always humiliating. However, SpongeBob physically can't remove his. Squidward then gets a ticket for littering. Police are never on the side of workers. Their job is to protect capital, and they will do so by any means necessary, including engaging in all-out warfare against strikers. First, SpongeBob and Squidward try making picket signs. Squidward makes a sign reading Krusty Krab unfair, but SpongeBob mishears this as Krusty Krab funfair. His sign attracts several customers who cross the picket line, trampling Squidward in the process. Picket signs are one of a striker's most important tools. They are used to convey why the workers are on strike and why the public should avoid the employer for its duration. Over the years, there have been some creative and beautiful picket signs. There have also been some rather vulgar ones. So long as it's not fighting words, profanity on picket signs is protected by the First Amendment. So workers can write, "Our employer is a..." on a picket sign, but this might not get much sympathy from the public. One picket line goal is to keep out customers. Reduced patronage disrupts profits, pressuring the boss to negotiate with the union to end the strike. This is why you should never cross a picket line as a customer unless you're explicitly exempt by the union. Recently, some heinous individuals tried to break up a picket line by driving their cars into strikers. Think twice about bringing violence to a picket line. Workers will fight back and lay you out. Continuing on, here we see SpongeBob dropping bars.
Krusty Krab is unfair! Mr. Krabs is in there! Standing at the concession! Plotting his oppression!
I mean, SpongeBob doesn't understand the chant, but he's still spitting.
You're a little confused, but he got the spirit.
Chants are another important element of a strike because media coverage can carry them far beyond the picket line. When considering what to chant, strikers should take into consideration simplicity, rhythm, any group inclinations, and the message. I'll link to an article that covers this in the description. A brace-faced teenager strolls up to SpongeBob and asks him to autograph his spatula. When SpongeBob asks if he's there to support the cause, the teenager reveals he's a strikebreaker hired to replace SpongeBob and crosses the picket line. Strikebreakers, or scabs, are less than scum. They take advantage of workers' struggle for their own personal gain, driving down wages and working conditions for all. The primary function of a picket line is to keep scabs out by creating a physical barrier between them and the workplace. Historically, picket lines were often scenes of violence as strikers threw everything from insults and fists to bricks and broken bottles at scabs. Crossing a picket line used to be a life-threatening act and had real consequences on one's social standing. Employers would attempt to protect strikebreakers by getting federal courts to issue injunctions against picketing. Today, Section 4 of the Norris LaGuardia Act prohibits these injunctions and workers have the right to picket their employers. However, it is unlawful to engage in mass picketing or secondary pickets. Squidward's disapproval of SpongeBob not threatening the scab is authentic. It was a kid though, so Squiddy taking a page from Michael Jordan. Fed up with SpongeBob's shenanigans, Squidward sends him out of sight. He then delivers an arousing speech directly to the public to get their sympathy. He goes full-on Eugene V. Debs. Debs was a labor organizer and socialist who ran for president from prison. And yes, organized labor has often created its own channels of communication to the public, like papers and blogs, because capitalist-owned media coverage of strikes is commonly presented from an anti-labor angle. Anyway, listen to Squidward's words here.
The gentle laborer shall no longer suffer from the noxious greed of Mr. Krabs. We will dismantle oppression board by board. We'll saw the foundation of big business in half, even if it takes an eternity. With your support, we will send the hammer of the people's will crashing through the windows of Mr. Krabs' house of servitude.
These are radical and vaguely anti-capitalist sentiments even by non-children's media standards, which I absolutely love. However, it highlights a trend in the labor movement where labor leaders will use this kind of rhetoric while not actually supporting socialism or even rank-and-file run unionism. This kind of conservatism has plagued the labor movement for decades and contributed to its downfall, a topic beyond the scope of this video. But does this apply to Squidward? We'll see. Squidward's speech fails to convince patrons not to cross the picket line.
Nobody gives a care about the fate of labor as long as they can get their instant gratification.
Unfortunately, many patrons care more about their comfort than worker struggle. But many more will respect picket lines and support strikes and boycotts however possible. Mr. Krabs thinks he's got them beat, and rightfully so. The strike has done nothing but attract more customers and increase profits, giving him no reason to rehire SpongeBob and Squidward. However, the combination of Squidward's speech and Mr. Krabs' gloating radicalizes SpongeBob, who, still a little confused, proclaims that they will strike forever until their demands are met. Traditionally, striking forever would scare workers as long-term strikes can be extremely stressful. While strikers might receive strike pay for the duration of their strike, this might only be $250 to $500 a week, depending on the copiousness of the union's strike fund. But in this case, Squidward is traumatized by the idea of being stuck on the picket line for eternity with SpongeBob. Fair enough. He's so afraid of this that he rushes to beg for his job back in the middle of the night, only to discover Mr. Krabs at his door. Mr. Krabs begs them to come back, as things haven't been going as well as he's let on. He wails that the literal children he hired are ruining the restaurant and annoying him. That's what children do, mate. Child labor was common in the 19th and early 20th century because children could be paid less and were less likely to organize. This awful practice is unfortunately not uncommon today in some industries, and will further make a comeback unless organized labor and children stop it. Worth mentioning that scabs are poor quality workers and often ruin work, sometimes intentionally. Just ask John Deere and Kellogg's. Like Squidward predicted, Mr. Krabs has realized that he needs his workers more than they need him. Mr. Krabs is willing to grant them any concession they want to get them back. Squidward uses this as an opportunity to negotiate the terms to end the strike. This is consistent with reality. When one side feels that they have more leverage or can no longer withstand, they will meet with the other side at the bargaining table to negotiate the end of the strike. However, a major problem here is that Squidward has taken it on himself to negotiate the end of the strike without SpongeBob's approval or knowledge. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for so-called union leaders to make decisions without the approval or knowledge of the rank and file. And much like in real life, this failure is going to have serious consequences. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is still awake, listening to folk music and empowered by Squidward's speech. My actual night routine, by the way. SpongeBob then decides to take Squidward's speech more seriously than Squidward meant. He sneaks into the Krusty Krab and goes full Luddite, destroying the joint. Luddites were English textile workers who destroyed mills to protest how capitalists were using technological developments to undermine their job security in the industry. They weren't opposed to new technology in general, but the effects that technology was having on their trade. The next morning, after seemingly tense but constructive negotiations, Mr. Krabs and Squidward have negotiated the end of the strike, presumably a tentative agreement. A tentative agreement is a proposed collective bargaining agreement that has not been ratified by the rank and file or union leaders. Once it has been approved, it then becomes a collective bargaining agreement, a legal contract between the union and the employer outlining pay, benefits, and working conditions for a set amount of time. Anyway, when Squidward and Mr. Krabs return, they are horrified to see SpongeBob has literally dismantled the establishment. Turns out Squidward didn't actually believe everything he was saying. Don't adopt radical rhetoric if you don't actually mean it. In the end, Mr. Krabs tells them both that they will work for him forever to pay off the damages. And that's exactly what happens. Well, I guess they want job security, right? All in all, this is my favorite episode of SpongeBob. Even though this is a satirical presentation of union and vaguely anti-capitalist stereotypes meant for children, it's still entertaining and contains numerous real references to union history and radical politics. It's one of the best depictions of organized labor action in animated programming, to the point that I've seen labor organizers reference it in organizer training. People have used this silly piece of adored children's media to educate workers about how to form a union, an endeavor that is one of the most difficult and life-changing experiences in a person's life. And it's for the same reason that people make SpongeBob memes. Nostalgia, the worldwide notoriety of the series, and the emotional response we feel rewatching this content. This whole episode hits different because as a kid, you identify with SpongeBob. You were young, happy-go-lucky, and you didn't realize the horrors of the workplace yet. At least, that was mainly the case when I was a kid. Again, kids today are working, and there are politicians and groups trying to expand child labor. Today, most of us identify with Squidward. We're older, we hate our jobs, and we're underpaid and overworked. We would all rather be at home playing clarinet or whatever. We work with actual SpongeBobs, people who love their meaningless jobs, love going to work. You know, the type of person that skips breaks just to finish the workload of two people. People who annoy us to death. But much like Squidward did with SpongeBob, we should educate these people on the unfair practices of the boss and organize our workplaces. We should strive to dismantle this oppressive establishment board by board and saw the foundation of big business in half so that we as people can restore ourselves to our rightful glory. Thanks for watching, and thank you for 5,000 subs. You are all amazing, and I cannot thank you enough for supporting my content, even when I got sidetracked by fake strike culture. I wanted to show my appreciation by doing some goofy media analysis, but if you like this type of content, I'm currently writing more videos like it. Next video should be more history focused though. Until we meet again, ciao.